Okay, you've got an hour and a half with somebody that's got a portfolio of $10.9 million in property. What are the questions that you're going to ask? We get pretty specific with this guy. This is Daniel Domingues. Now, he is not from anything special. Moved to Australia in 2002 from Brazil, and he has almost an $11 million property portfolio. And this is an awesome session. We unpack kind of the due diligence process that he thinks about things. What are the frameworks that he uses? Because you can't just get to $11 million property portfolio without doing a little bit of work, without thinking. But he is absolutely obsessed with property. And the way that he thinks about going about getting deals is very different to how a first-time investor thinks about it. So I think there's a lot to learn from this session. And like, subscribe, do all of that stuff. Hey everyone, my name's Joe Tucker, and together with Jeff Miles, we created Oz Property Investors, Australia's largest property investment community. We've got over 83,000 members. Off the back of that, we have the Level Up Property course, which teaches everyday Aussies how to buy and successfully build property portfolios. And this week, no different. We got experts on, and you can unpack and learn from their wisdom. We've got Daniel Domingues, $11 million property portfolio. Let's jump in. Throw in your questions, throw in your comments. He's very active on the social, so if you want to learn and grow, let us know.
So how do you think about strategy and property planning on where to buy next? Do you see, like, at the strategy planning and what to buy next, do you see this as more important necessarily than where you buy? How do you think about that?
That's just one piece of information, because there is so many layers that you need to think about, from strategy all the way to the property management, and then eventually refinancing and starting the whole cycle again. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna share my screen again just for a little second, just to show something else, because I kind of want to take through the conversation today about all these different topics. And let me know if you can see the screen.
Okay, here we go. Property purchase.
Yeah,
it's a bit bigger.
Boots on the ground, strategy and foundation.
Well, that's basically the process that we spoke about the presentation about the chat today, and all the steps that I consider, like what do I go through when I'm purchasing my next property. So my view is there is 6 sort of distinct sort of steps that I probably think through along the way, and within those 6 steps there is information, data, and research that you probably need to do at 3 different levels, being state, LGA, and suburb, and the property itself. So the 2 that for example, we just spoke about, it is just part of that last layer, which is the property itself. But there is so many things that you need to go through, even through due diligence, research, and even before that, actually setting up the strategy.
Because a lot of people say that it doesn't matter about sort of where you not doesn't matter where you buy, but to me, both are important. But I think a lot of people get so caught up on, I need to go and buy Mossman, or I need to go and buy in Townsville, and they sort of cotton onto these markets just as they're about to, and then they compromise on the asset. So for me, and you bought some duplex in your thing, but I think you sort of were focused on, yes, the area, and then you also focus on the what. So the point I'm trying to make there is, I think it's important that you consider both, rather than just saying, okay, great, I'm going to go and buy Townsville and whatever I can buy. It doesn't matter, but you need to sort of layer those things, as you said. So that was kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah,
I think.
Look, the property is the last thing that you need to think about, because there is no point start search on real estate. How does that property look like if you have no idea what you're looking for? And you only know what you're looking for once you sort of have gone through some of those things. So where I usually start, and it goes back to the most fundamental thing, is that first step, which is the strategy and setting the foundations. And in that step, what I go through in my mind is basically thinking about what is my end goal and what is my strategy path to get there. So, and that could be a number of ways of getting there, and it could be a number of different asset classes. But today we're talking about property, of course. So looking at property, there is, of course, two different assets not so much two different assets, but there's two types of property that you can go. You can go for a growth type of asset, or some sort of equity growth deal, so something that you're going to get like some chunk of money at some stage, or you go for a cash flow. And you're probably going to need those different type of assets in different time, in different sort of stages of your portfolio building. It could be that you are at the beginning of your journey, and then you're most likely going to need some growth property in there. You're going to need to build equity. And if that's what you need, there is no point looking for a regional deal or a rooming house, something that's going to give you the cash flow, because that's not what you need at that stage. So before you think about the asset, you need to think about what's your goal and what's your strategy and what's the type of property that is going to get you there, to be able to think about, to start sort of thinking about the area and everything else in there. So
what are some of like variables within that, right? Like, I mean, my goal is to make a bazillion dollars, right? Like, I want to make the most amount of money in the quickest amount of time. How should I?
It's truly, mate, 5 million is good for me. Unencumbered, that is.
Yeah, 5 million unencumbered. There you go. But how much, like, I guess, talk to me for more specifics, like what, like, because everyone wants capital growth and everyone wants cash flow. And now you're saying there's capital growth or there's cash flow. But when should I inject capital growth and when should I inject cash flow into my portfolio?
And I can give you a personal example. So in my portfolio, I've got 12 properties, including the PPOR. So 4 of them I myself manage super fund. And I can give a really sort of example. Within my portfolio, I actually have 2 separate strategies, because I have a strategy that I have defined for my self-managed super fund and a strategy that I have outside of super, and they are quite different. So for example, in my self-managed super fund, which I set up back in 2020, and I have bought 4 properties in there, my strategy from day one has always been about buying affordable properties that are in growth corridors and are slightly negatively gearing. More, I prefer if they are in a neutral position, like in that space, with a likelihood that with some rental growth over the next few years, it's going to become positive. So the key things in there, in sort of setting up my strategy and the path to get there for self-managed super fund, is looking for those properties that is gonna be in areas that is population growth, that is infrastructure spend, and I'm looking for yields from anywhere from 5, 6 to 8. You know that it's really hard to get like the high yields, especially now after some growth during after COVID times. But if you start getting in that 5, 6, and there is room to grow the rental income in the next few years, eventually get to 7 and 8 in a few years time. And then you start having that positively geared property. So that has been, for example, the strategy on my on my portfolio. So of course, not a financial advice here to anyone, but that has been my personal sort of strategy.
Like, how do you think about boots on the ground? How do you think about that more? Okay, we've done our macro strategy. You know, I'm just starting out, and as you kind of noted, we're buying initially growth-focused assets because that's what we have to do. Because saving $100,000 or $80,000 for a deposit sucks, and I don't want to keep doing that. And if I've got 2 properties growing at, you know, 5, 7, 10%. I can get my deposit, you know, if it's growing at 10% on a 500,000, that's 50 grand. Great. I've done that in 2 to 3 years. Great. I've got another 100 grand. Great. Let's keep going. So let's say growth is the focus. We're now going to look for an asset. How do we think about boots on the ground?
All right. So following my logic, the next step would have been about building the buying approach. So you know what you want. So let's say you're going for a growth type of property. You have your pre-approval, you know how much you can spend. Then you need to start thinking about what are the areas that I can go after to find that type of property. Also, you need to consider, do I know enough to actually do all this research by myself? Do I need help? And going back to the education point, do I need to sort of go back and educate myself first? Or do I want to potentially outsource instead of doing that all by myself? Do I want to use a buyer's agent? And I'm the first one to say I have done both. I have purchased property myself, and I have used buyer's agents. And in fact, I think my last 6, 7 transactions, I have used the buyer's agents all the time. Even on the rooming house, I did the research myself. I found the property because I was talking to the property manager. But the moment that I found the property, I just reached out to a buyer's agent, negotiated for me, please. I just used the buyer's agent to do the negotiation piece, which kind of a little bit of a different deal, but was just to get some help on a specific for that. So it's just understanding where you probably your gaps are. Yeah. So it's just
identifying your gaps.
Yeah, identify the gaps and where you need help, and then take it from there.
Like, at what point do you use a buyer's agent, and when do you not use a buyer's agent? How do you think about that?
Typically, if for example, if I'm buying anywhere that I have no knowledge of the area itself, because I don't live nearby, or if I have, especially if I'm buying interstate, I don't know the areas. I don't know, even with all the research, you're never gonna know all the specifics, ins and outs of that area. So I think that's to me, it's a great sort of calling where you're probably gonna need some help, and you can probably bridge that gap by, for example, calling a lot of property managers and in the area and sort of identifying specific pockets in areas that you should be buying, because you can get some feedback. But it depends how much time that you have available to do that. Because I think one of the key things is when to use the buyer's agent is how much time you have allocated to do that, and the speed to market. For example, every time that I use a buyer's agent, it takes, I would say, like within 4 to 6 weeks, I found a deal, and I'm sort of contracts exchanged and just waiting for settlement, because the moment that I know what I want and I briefing the buyer's agent, I typically will start getting some deals, and then I start sort of doing my due diligence and start sort of crunching some numbers. And the moment that I found one, let's go, and then not wasting time. So I think that if I'm using a buyer's agent, one of the things that I take into account is that I'm probably going to get a deal a lot quicker than I would if I'm sort of doing all the research and things by myself. So it depends. Do I want to buy a property in the next 4 to 6 weeks, or do I want to drag this on for, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months, because I'll have to do everything on my own and save some money in there. So to me, I see a value in the transaction, and that's why I use it. Yeah.
What are those on the ground sort of considerations? Yes, it's renter to owner percentage. Yes, it's housing commission. Yeah. What are the things that you think about in a deal?
Yeah. So once you have gone through all that initial process of strategy, brief, what I'm looking, then you start going to the areas and the type of property. So I think this is probably the most exciting bit for everyone, because then you start looking into areas, narrowing down what type of location and the type of property that you sort of you're gonna buy. So those are kind of the step 3 and 4 that I had on the chart before. So the research, selection, and the due diligence. So when you start looking into that, there is few things that you need to consider, and there is a number of tools that it is at your disposal that you should actually look at. So, for example, in terms of due diligence, you're gonna have to check for bushfire, flooding, the demographics, or what type of sort of people live in the area, because it is families, it's retirees. So that will dictate what type of property that you should be buying to rent. Because and I use an example, like one of my properties that I have in Central Coast is inside like a golf course resort, and there's lots of retirees. So when I build the house in there, one of the key things is I'm building a single level house, because it can not only cater for a family, but it can also cater for retirees, because they don't want to go up and down the stairs. So this is the type of stuff that you need to think about when you're looking at all these things. So the demographics is one of them. So the other thing, sorry, just looking at my notes here. before I completely lose my train of thought. So you look at the demographics, and for example, the social housing thing is just one component of that. But as again, you need to look at what type of people living there, what type of income they have, what type of rental income you get out of it. Is the vacancy rates high or not in that area? Because it's going to take you time to actually get somebody to fit in, to put in their property. And then you look at the expenses, the council, the strata, the insurance, the water, and all those things will sort of build a picture to actually just quickly do a cash flow analysis. What type of income I will get and yield I will get out of this deal once you start looking into that in a specific area. So if I'm looking at the demographic and stuff, so as I said, the forecast ID is one tool that I use heavily, and I think it's great because you can see population, you can see migration movements, you can see forecasts, so you can see if an area is likely to increase population. And not only that, it tells you, for example, when I was buying in Ballarat, I bought in Mount Helen. And when you look at the areas in Ballarat that you have all the population growth, you can kind of see this kind of on the west side of Ballarat, so like Alfreton.
Minderee, maybe? Or
yeah, so all that sort of on the left-hand side, that's all the new development. So if you're buying a property in there, you should try to avoid buying in areas where there's a lot of home and land package, because those are the areas that you probably have a lot of land releases, and prices are gonna sort of be impacted in terms of growth, because if you buy on a more established area, you're probably gonna get a better return for your capital growth. So that's just something that I sort of look. So I think this is a great tool.
There's so much in this platform. Like where do you what you're going to go to?
I go through all that. So you look at the population, look at the demographics, you look at the forecast, and some of the tabs. Like for example, if you go into the components of change, if not mistaken, I think the third or fourth in there, that it actually tells you like it gives like, I can't remember. There was one area that tells you like, oh, this area is going through some gentrification. Like you can actually find out some specifics and pockets, what's happening in those areas. So I think it's a great tool, and just take your time, read it, have a look at the area that's sort of your interest to buy, because you can get a lot of information out of it.
I don't know about you, Dan, and I mentioned this one to you before when we were doing the pre-chat. Open stats, and yes, we love microverbs as well. They're all. I mean, microverbs is great. I just hope Luke isn't watching, but open stats just is much. The UI user interface, the user experience is much easier to navigate, and maybe that's because I don't pay for microverbs, but I just find that this is really navigation wise, it's fantastic to see it visually in front of you, kind of like your ID profile, but this kind of hones in on the rent to the owner and the demographics profile as well.
What was the other platform that you were talking about there?
I was gonna say another platform like beyond real estate and domain, which I think it has a lot of insights from suburbs. I think another great tool, and like I don't think it's not known, but I think it's probably not widely used, is a lot of the information that you can get out of SQM research when you're looking at specific suburb. Because going back to those trends, for example, if you want to have a look at how is the vacancy rates trending for a specific suburb, it's amazing. Like you can see that an area is getting tighter or not, and you can just do I think you have to go to then you have to type where you have the suburb, just type the suburb name or the postcode, and it will give you the details.
What suburb did you buy your rooming in?
What's Mount Helen? Just type Mount Helen.
What else do you use SQM for?
You can. There's a plenty of like if you just keep on like you look at the sales. Sorry, it's too small for me to read. But so the sold records, the asking price, asking rental. Like you can have a look
through. Clicking through
it. You can see a trend, and you can see like, for example, houses are sort of increased. So are units in that sense. But you can see in some areas like how houses are probably going to be performing different than units, and that can give you some ideas of what type of property is actually better suited for that specific area if you're looking in an area, but and what to buy.
Okay. Any other platforms? I like this bit. This is fun. I'll post this.
Yeah. Look, there are not necessarily platforms, but there are other things that not necessarily free, but I find it helpful. And I think most of the BAs that I have used leverage a lot of the research that comes from Terry Ryder and the hotspotting, for example. So if you're buying a property in a specific location, you can purchase those reports yourself, but sometimes the professionals that are using can sort of leverage some of that research as well, and it provides you with a ton of information about that area that you're looking at. So probably don't have the details in here of sort of how does the report look like, because it is a paid service, but
It's very expensive.
Yes, so some of the stuff can be quite pricey, but I think it's provides some good insights. If you don't have the time to do all that research yourself, you can go and just purchase a report, for example.